The ground trembled beneath Captain Ronan Dace's boots as the tremors grew stronger. He stood on the jagged ice plains of Vortis 9, breathing in air that smelled like metal and regret. His fingers, wrapped in cracked exogloves, gripped the old command shard tighter. It pulsed now, after over 200 years of silence. Something was waking beneath him. Something monstrous. Something human. He glanced back at the dig crew. Convicts, mostly. Thrown away by the Council of Systems for war crimes, piracy, or just being too difficult to control. He wasn't any better. Once decorated, now discarded. A war relic just like what lay sleeping under the ice. They said humans were extinct, said we vanished in the Great Collapse. But they never found the body, did they? A deep groan rumbled through the ice shelf again, louder this time. The mountain behind them cracked open like a bleeding wound, steam and frozen vapor blasting skyward. The prisoners dropped their tools and backed away, wide-eyed. "Get back to the ship," Ronan barked, but it was too late. From the fracture emerged metal, not sleek like the designs of the Zarn or the polished crystal crafts of the Tayari. No, this was brutal, rusted war steel, unmistakably human. The surface of the behemoth carrier, blackened from ancient battle scars, shuddered as it pushed against centuries of frozen earth. Ronan fell to one knee, the command shard glowing hot in his grip. He could feel it sinking, recognizing him. "Captain registered," a voice hissed in his ear, deep and broken. "Awaiting directives." His breath caught. That voice had been silent for lifetimes. Ship mines didn't survive collapse. Not unless... "Are you still operational?" he asked quietly. "Partially. Weapons offline. Core fractured. But vengeance. Intact." The last word echoed in his mind like a scream from the grave. Above, the storm clouds parted as the rising mass tore through the sky, revealing just a fraction of what had been buried. Towers, rail cannons, hangars big enough to berth destroyers. It wasn't just a ship. It was a goddamn fortress. The Vindicator, humanity's last supercarrier. He remembered her from archives. She went missing the day Earth fell. And now she was awake. A distant thunder rolled, not from the ship, but from the heavens. Lights blinked into view. Alien, scouts, the Tayari, no doubt. The peacekeepers of the New Order. They'd detected the rise. Ronan knew what came next. Protocols, threat assessments, and then extermination. "Guess they didn't want us found," he muttered. The crew watched from behind crates and rocks, terror in their eyes. "Back to the ship," he shouted again, but none moved. One of the men, Griggs, a pirate with more scars than skin, stepped forward. "What is that, Captain?" "That," Ronan said, not taking his eyes off the beast rising from the deep, "is the reason they tried to erase us." The command shard buzzed again. "2 Tayari scouts inbound, threat level, minor, engage." "Negative," Ronan snapped. "Not yet." He needed time. He needed answers. Why had the Vindicator buried itself? Why had it synced to him? And why the hell did he feel like every eye in the galaxy just turned to look at this frozen wasteland? Because the galaxy remembered what this ship had done, what humans had done. And it was afraid. Ronan walked toward the exposed metal, boots crunching over ice and ash. The temperature spiked. The air trembled. This wasn't just steel. It was anger made real. He placed the shard into a glowing socket as the wall opened, revealing a dark corridor leading into the belly of the beast. A whisper danced in his mind. "Welcome home." "Captain." He stepped inside, not knowing whether he was about to reclaim humanity's lost glory or start its final war. Ronan stepped into the belly of the Vindicator, and the sound of the outside world died behind him, like a door slamming shut on history. The metal corridor was cold and dark, only faint emergency strips lighting up with each slow step he took. It smelled of old smoke, scorched fuel, and blood, a forgotten battlefield preserved in time. The voice echoed again in his mind, not mechanical, not sterile like modern AI. This voice was coarse, angry, human. Core functions, stabilizing, identity confirmed, Captain Ronan Dace, DNA registered, clearance level Command Alpha. Ronan didn't remember ever serving on the Vindicator, but his grandfather had, one of the last war dogs of the Terran defense fleet before the collapse. Ronan had always thought the stories were half-truths. Now, standing in this tomb of war, he realized they were probably toned down. The corridor led to a central lift shaft, frozen in place, hydraulics groaning back to life as if the ship itself was shaking off the weight of centuries. The walls pulsed with a dull red glow, and for a moment he felt like he was walking into the mouth of a sleeping dragon. When the lift doors slid open, the scent hit him harder. Gunpowder and oil mixed with that sharp tang of cryo fluid. And then came the silence again. That awful, grave-like silence that only existed in abandoned ships and ruined cities. Bridge access authorized. The lift shot upward with a shudder that made his spine jolt. As he ascended, memories not his own began bleeding into his mind. Ghost images flickered through the lift's cracked panels, young officers shouting orders, alarms blaring, massive alien ships bursting into flame outside the viewing ports. Panic, heroism, death. The last moments of the Vindicator before it buried itself. And then, the bridge. When the doors slid open, Ronan stepped onto a floor lined with bones. He froze. Dozens of skeletal remains were strapped into seats, some still clutching weapons, others with empty eye sockets staring at dead monitors. One sat slumped in the command chair, its charred uniform still bearing the old Terran eagle insignia across the chest. "Jesus," Ronan whispered, stepping carefully over the remains. "You kept them all here." Final crew died defending core systems. No recovery possible. Preserved for recognition. "You used them," Ronan muttered bitterly. "You bled them dry and then shut yourself down." "They chose to stay." His throat tightened. He didn't know these men and women, but something about the way they remained, quiet, strapped in, dignified even in death, filled him with a deep, rattling anger. These weren't soldiers, they were relics, fossils of an empire erased by fear. He pulled the command shard from his chest rig and slid it into the main console. The room groaned, flickered, and then blazed to life. Screens blinked open. A HUD stretched across the ceiling, mapping out the system. Red markers appeared immediately, 2 Tayari scouts circling overhead. Ronan's eyes hardened. "They're waiting to see what we do. Weapons offline, targeting system fractured, reactor at 43%, only core shielding active. So we're a sitting target. Correction, we are a threat not yet rearmed." Ronan let out a bitter chuckle. Same thing to them. The chair, once belonging to the previous captain, creaked as he sat down. The bones beneath him had been reduced to dust. Ash, maybe. He didn't care. The moment he touched the armrests, the system surged again. "Command interface calibrated, awaiting directives." He leaned forward. "Bring up crew logs. Show me the last entry before shutdown." A holographic projection crackled to life in front of him, playing a recording with grainy static. A grizzled man appeared, tired eyes, blood on his face, one hand pressed to a gut wound. "This is Admiral Kent Dace," the man croaked. Ronan's heart stopped. His grandfather. "If this ship is ever found, if some bastard is sitting in my chair right now, know this: the Council betrayed Earth. They cut our supplies, fed our locations to the Zarn, and then broadcast our position to the Tayari Peace Corps. Said we were dangerous, said we wouldn't surrender. He coughed, hard, red foam spilling from his mouth. We didn't surrender. We buried the Vindicator ourselves, powered down the reactor, froze the core. We left the galaxy to rot. If you're seeing this, I hope you burn it all. The screen went dark. Ronan sat back, fists clenched so tight his nails cut into his palms. The room around him pulsed slowly, like it was breathing. Like the ship itself felt his rage and agreed with it. The comms lit up. Griggs' voice broke through, nervous. Cap, we got company. Tayari gunship just dropped out of orbit. She's aiming weapons. Ronan snapped to his feet. Do not engage. He stormed out of the bridge and down the lift. As it rattled lower, the voice in his head pulsed again. Captain, reactivation of weapon systems will require human input. We are incomplete. We require the dead. What do you mean? DNA required. Human fragments. Legacy codes embedded in marrow. He understood immediately, and his stomach turned. The crew, the bones, they weren't just buried for honor. They were fuel. Not biologically, but symbolically. The ship had encrypted its weapons systems behind biometric locks. They needed those signatures to unlock everything. This ship wasn't just built with blood. It needed blood to wake up. He returned to the hangar bay, where the prison crew was assembling gear, clearly itching to flee. Griggs stepped forward, rifle across his chest. They're not responding to hails. What now, Cap? We arm up, Ronan said, stepping into the command podium, and we let them know what we are. Griggs narrowed his eyes. We got no guns. We will. Ronan pointed behind him as a panel hissed open, revealing a weapons cache older than any of them had ever seen. Coil rifles, plasma knives, rail pistols, all dusty, but all deadly. Griggs grinned like a dog set loose. As the others scrambled for weapons, Ronan accessed a smaller terminal and keyed in a command. Authorize override, Dace Legacy, unlock security decks, begin wake protocol. The lights across the ship surged. Somewhere deep in its heart, the reactor growled to life like a sleeping monster stretching its limbs. The ship began to rise higher from the ice, groaning against gravity. Outside, the Tayari gunship blinked red. And then came the message across all open frequencies. Unregistered human vessel. This is an illegal reactivation. Power down and surrender immediately. Ronan stepped forward to the console and spat the words back into the comm. Humanity doesn't surrender. You forgot that. We're here to remind you. No answer. Just silence. And then, light. A beam from the gunship scorched across the ice, hitting the exposed upper hull of the Vindicator. The whole ship shook. Griggs turned to Ronan. That was a warning shot. Ronan's jaw tightened. Good. Warn them again. He looked at the flickering interface beside him, and as if answering his fury, a message flashed. Partial weapons recovered. Primary rail cannon online. Target locked. Ronan didn't hesitate. Fire. The ship howled. From deep inside, a thunderous crack echoed out, and a streak of burning light ripped into the heavens. The Tayari gunship exploded in a silent burst of flame, its remains scattering like ash. The crew stared, stunned. Ronan turned slowly, his voice cold. They thought we were dead. Let's make them wish we stayed that way. The smoldering wreckage of the Tayari scout vessel rained down like black snow, streaks of fire slicing across the Vortis 9 sky. Ronan stood at the edge of the exposed hangar, watching the last ember disappear into the ice storms. His fingers were still trembling, but not from fear. From release. From that deep, ancient satisfaction, the kind that only comes when a predator reminds the world why it was feared. Behind him, The men stood in stunned silence. Some looked terrified, others hungry. Griggs stepped beside him, rifle slung lazily over his shoulder. "You just declared war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy, Cap." Ronan didn't take his eyes off the clouds. "Good. They've had it too easy." He turned to face the crew. "I'm not going to lie to you. We're outgunned, half-buried, and barely alive. But this ship was built for war. Built by men who bled in silence while the rest of the galaxy got fat and complacent. The Vindicator remembers. And now, so will they." Griggs let out a dark laugh, low and full of something primal. "I think I missed this part of the sentencing agreement." "You want out?" Ronan asked. Griggs shook his head. "Hell no, I've been bored for years." The others began moving, some gathering weapons, others setting up defenses along the jagged ice. None questioned his command now. Not after that shot. Not after watching a supercarrier rip the sky open like a page in a forgotten war book. Ronan turned back inside, his boots echoing against the cold deck as he made his way deeper into the ship. The Vindicator wasn't done waking up. "Captain," the voice returned in his head. "Weapons matrix partially restored, navigation offline, core memory corrupted, cryovault access available." "Cryovault?" Ronan stopped in his tracks. Survivors in suspended animation, 12 signatures. Human as heart froze. Human. After all this time? "Show me." A panel lit up beside him, displaying a schematic of the ship's lower decks. A chamber deep in the engineering sector glowed faintly, barely powered, its systems flickering. "Open it," he said. The doors hissed and unlocked as he approached the sealed cryovault. Cold vapor spilled out like the breath of ghosts. Inside, 12 pods stood in 2 rows, each covered in a thin layer of frost. Lights blinked uncertainly above them. Most red, a few green. A silent field of sleeping warriors. Ronan stepped closer. Each pod had a nameplate, some rusted so badly they were unreadable. But the faces beneath the glass, pale, frozen, untouched by time, were unmistakably human. Soldiers, officers. One still clutched a photo of his family, pressed against the glass like a plea. "Why didn't you wake them?" Ronan whispered. "Vital signs unstable, cryostasis degraded, risk of neural collapse, 68%. "They're dying?" "If not revived soon, permanent brain loss imminent." Ronan placed his hand on the nearest pod. The man inside had a jagged scar across his cheek, and a look of pain frozen mid-expression. Probably went in bleeding. "Do it. Wake one." "Confirming. Initiating revival sequence on Subject 07, Lieutenant R. Hallen." The pod hissed loudly, heating coils glowing, fluid draining into the base. Alarms chirped in protest. The body inside twitched, gasped, then convulsed. Ronan gritted his teeth as he watched. The man's eyes snapped open, blood vessels popping in one of them. He coughed violently, collapsing forward into Ronan's arms, shaking uncontrollably. What year is it?" Hallen rasped, his voice like gravel. Ronan lowered him gently onto the deck. "Too far from yours." The man blinked slowly, looking around, breath catching as he recognized the ship. "The Vindicator. We buried it. Wait, who are you?" "Captain Ronan Dace, your Admiral's grandson." That name hit him like a hammer. Hallen winced as if remembering pain. "Kent. He told us we'd never wake up. Said if we did, it meant the war never ended." Ronan nodded grimly. "It didn't. They just changed how they kill us." Ronan helped the man sit upright as he coughed blood into his hand. "We'll get you stabilized," Ronan said. "Then I want your memories, all of them." Hallen looked at him, eyes wild. "You have no idea what this ship really is, what it carries." Ronan leaned closer. "Then tell me." But before the soldier could speak, The ship jolted hard. Alarms flared. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in red. "Captain, multiple warp signatures entering system. Tayari fleet, 5 destroyers, 1 command vessel. ETA, 17 minutes. Ronan stood up, cold dread slicing through him. They responded fast. Response time suggests previous tracking. Interception was anticipated. So they had been watching. Waiting. The first scout was just the trigger. He looked down at Hallen. The man stared at him, jaw tight. "They won't let you leave," Hallen said. "Not with this ship, not with what's inside." Ronan turned to the pods. 11 more lives, 11 more pieces of a forgotten war, and a ship filled with secrets he hadn't even begun to uncover. He tapped his comms. "Griggs, get everyone inside. Lock down the perimeter. We've got incoming." "What's the plan?" the voice crackled back. Ronan looked up at the old steel ceiling, voice low. "We hold the line. We bleed if we have to, but we don't let them bury us again." He returned to the bridge, boots pounding across steel that now pulsed with energy. The ship was waking more and more with each moment, lights brightening, systems stabilizing. Somewhere deep inside, humanity's forgotten legacy was stirring. He slid back into the command chair, hands moving across the console with growing confidence. "Damage report? Starboard hull still fractured. Weapons at 23%. Shield emitters functional. No FTL capability. Escape impossible." "So we fight." "Affirmative. Uploading tactical suggestions. Terrain provides minor advantages. Avalanche potential along ridge axis." Ronan smiled grimly. "We'll bring the mountain down on them if we have to." As the timer on the HUD ticked closer, 16 minutes, 15, 14, Ronan's mind raced. He didn't believe in last stands, but this felt like one. Unless... He opened the old command logs, searching deeper than before, past the bridge protocols, past the weapons codes, into the black vaults, the forbidden archives. A folder blinked back at him. Project Black Spire. "What the hell is this?" he murmured. "Access requires dual captain authentication." He stared at the message. Dual authentication. The previous captain was dust, but his blood remained. He turned to the panel beside him. A sealed compartment sat behind a bulkhead. Ronan broke it open. Inside, a small blackened bone fragment wrapped in stasis cloth. The old captain's remains, just enough DNA to count. He placed the cloth into the console's biometric scanner. Lights surged red, then green. Authentication confirmed. Project Black Spire unlocked. What emerged made his stomach twist. The Vindicator wasn't just a warship. It was a seed, a backup of Earth, blueprints for human cities, DNA archives, strategic weapon AI, old god codes, everything. The last nuclear heart of the Terran Empire. And the Tayari knew. That's why they were coming. Not for the ship, but to stop what it carried. Ronan stared at the data. This wasn't a warship. It was a rebirth, or a reckoning, and in 13 minutes he'd have to decide which. Ronan stared at the glowing interface in front of him, heart hammering against his ribs. Project Black Spire. The name alone felt too heavy for one man to carry. Inside that buried archive were the blueprints for the resurrection of humanity, or the damnation of everything else. He wasn't just sitting in a warship anymore. He was sitting on the last loaded gun of a fallen empire, pointed squarely at a galaxy that thought it was safe. Behind him, the ship creaked and groaned, still coming back to life, hungry for orders. "Jesus," he muttered. "Captain," the ship's voice cut in sharply. "Enemy fleet approaching lunar arc. 12 minutes to strike range." The screen lit up with red indicators. 5 Tayari destroyers, sleek and silver, moving in a tight formation. Their lead vessel, A command-class cruiser named Hymn of Harmony glided just behind, elegant in its design, terrifying in its implication. These weren't just border patrols or scouts. This was an execution team. Ronan stood from the chair, fists clenched, knuckles white. "Pull up environmental control for the mountain ridge." Avalanche trigger mapped. Blast at coordinates 309-A should destabilize shelf. "Prep the charge," he ordered. Outside, the crew scrambled. Griggs stood atop a snowy outcrop, binoculars scanning the sky. He saw them now, the sleek glints of silver like metallic vultures above the ice. "Captain," he barked into comms, "they're coming in tight." "Formation sweep. Looks like they want to surround us before we fire another shot." "Let them," Ronan replied. Back on the bridge, Ronan keyed in secondary protocols. Old Earth countermeasures. Systems that hadn't been used since the day Earth burned. Magnetic disruptors, anti-orbital shrapnel pulses, and one ancient beast of a trick. The Terran Ghost Pulse. A short-burst EMP designed to fry alien guidance systems with human neural patterns. Half of it was barely functioning, but half was enough. He stared at the blinking file again. Black Spire. Inside were instructions to rebuild cities, resurrect long-dead Earth flora, clone early-stage settlers, entire human populations stored as DNA strings and memory matrices, protected by the ship's ancient mind. And if he activated the seed core, the ship wouldn't just defend itself, it would become the Ark. "Dace," a voice called faintly. He turned to see Hallen staggering onto the bridge, wrapped in a thermal blanket, face pale, eyes sharp with memory. "You've seen it, haven't you?" Hallen asked. "Black Spire." Ronan nodded. "Why didn't your crew use it?" "We were ordered not to," Hallen said bitterly. "Your grandfather had the chance to activate it when Earth fell, but he couldn't. Said we didn't deserve to rise again." "And you agreed?" "I followed orders. I was a soldier, not a prophet." Ronan eyed him. "What about now?" Hallen looked at the screen. The enemy ships closing in. The skeletal crew scrambling to defend their own graves. The command chair humming with the burden of command. "I think the galaxy's forgotten what humans really are," Hallen whispered. "Maybe it's time we remind them." Ronan moved back to the command console. 11 pods still slept in the cryovault, waiting to be awakened. He couldn't revive them all. Systems were too fragile, but he would bring up 2 more. Engineers, specialists. "Ship, initiate revival sequence. Subjects 04 and 09. Priority override. Command Dace." "Confirmed. Revival in progress." Griggs's voice crackled again. "Fleet's getting closer. 10 clicks and closing. You ready to make some noise?" "Oh, I'm ready," Ronan said, pressing the ignition for the avalanche charge. A thunderclap rolled across the landscape. The mountain shelf above the valley split like an egg, and thousands of tons of ice came crashing down. Whiteout engulfed the ridgeline, swallowing the sky, the air, the sun itself. 2 Tayari destroyers were caught mid-descent. One spun out, slammed into a glacier, and vanished in fire. The other lost stability and veered off, crashing into a frozen ravine. "2 down!" Griggs laughed manically. "You beautiful bastard!" But it wasn't enough. "Remaining fleet redirecting course. Anti-ground bombardment in 10 minutes. Hallen pulled himself into the tactical chair. "They'll rain fire and glass this place. You know that, right?" "I'm counting on it," Ronan said. He pulled up the ghost pulse. "Ship, how many emitters are still viable?" 4 functional. Range minimal. Calibration unstable. Risk to organic mines. High. Ronan cracked a grin. "Good. Let's give them a real taste of the human brain." He keyed in the calibration, syncing the pulse pattern with human neural signatures pulled from the pods and from his own interface. The idea was simple, primitive even, but the effect was devastating. The signal mimicked human fear, rage, and desperation all at once. No machine could process it, not without crashing. Pulse locked, awaiting trigger. Ronan activated the external broadcast system and spoke across the open frequencies. Tayari Fleet, this is Captain Ronan Dace of the Vindicator. The ship you thought was dead. The species you thought extinct. You've made a mistake. Static. And then, surrender immediately. Do not resist. This will be your only warning. Ronan smiled. Number that was yours. He pressed the trigger. The Vindicator howled. A pulse of invisible energy roared out from its central core, fueled by centuries of buried fury. The Tayari ships above shimmered, flickered. One blinked out of the sky like a candle snuffed. Another began spinning uncontrollably, systems fried. The command ship twitched in the air, venting plasma from its flanks. On the ground, Ronan staggered, nose bleeding, eyes burning. Hallen collapsed against the console, groaning. But the damage was done. 3 enemy vessels disabled, 1 crippled, command ship retreating to high orbit. The crew below erupted in cheers, some firing their rifles skyward like they were back in the old world. Griggs called in again, voice breathless. "They're running, Cap. You knocked their teeth out." "No," Ronan said quietly. "I reminded them we still have teeth." The bridge lights dimmed for a moment, then steadied. Revival beacons blinked in the distance. 2 more humans would awaken soon. 2 more pieces of the past returned to a galaxy that tried to forget them. But Ronan knew this wasn't a victory. It was a warning. They would return. Stronger. Smarter. And next time, they wouldn't bring destroyers. They'd bring extinction, which left him with one choice. He activated the final command protocol. Project Blackspire, partial initiation, seed core unlocking, begin replication of primary archives. Confirmed, world seed countdown initiated, 48 hours. "You sure about this?" Hallen asked. "No," Ronan said, walking toward the viewport. He looked out at the frozen world, at the ice stained with the blood of the future, at the wreckage of a galaxy that thought it had won. "But we're not asking for permission anymore." The hum beneath the deck had changed. It no longer sounded like a machine waking up. It sounded like something alive, breathing, growing. The Vindicator's core pulsed with ancient fire, slow at first, then with rhythm, as if syncing to Ronan's heartbeat. Along the floors and walls, dormant nodes came to life, blooming with pale blue light like veins rediscovering circulation. In the bowels of the ship, deep beneath what any outsider would ever see, the seed core began spinning. Locked for centuries, its first layers unfurled with a sound that was more scream than signal. The room it sat in, circular, steel-walled, shielded 100 times over, glowed with silent menace. Inside the core, the genetic map of mankind's origins, Earth's last encrypted memories, and schematics for a civilization long buried in rubble and ash. Project Blackspire wasn't just about survival. It was about restoration, about reclaiming. But above all, it was about domination. Ronan stood alone on the bridge, watching the final red marker on the HUD retreat into orbit. The Tayari command ship hadn't pressed another attack. Their sleek cruiser lingered above the clouds, just out of range, like a predator licking its wounds but not quite ready to run. It wasn't fear holding them back. It was calculation. They'd seen the pulse, felt the wrath, and now they were calling for something bigger, something worse. They'd come back, and Ronan knew it. Behind him, Hallen was seated, face ashen. The man had aged a decade in the last few hours. The revival had taken its toll, and the pulse wave had wrung his body dry. I remember the look on their faces, Hallen said quietly. The Tayari, when we turned the ghost pulse on them the first time, it was supposed to be non-lethal, disorienting, but their ships started eating themselves. An eye burned out. Pilots had seizures in their cockpits. We thought it was a bug. Ronan didn't speak. He kept watching the stars. It wasn't a bug, Hallen said. It was human emotion, turned into a weapon. That's what scares them. Not our ships, not our weapons. United States, our grief, our rage, our stubbornness to die. They've been trying to erase that, Ronan muttered. For centuries. Yeah, and now it's back. The console beeped. Cryo subjects 04 and 09 stabilized. Engineering and medical teams activated. 2 more humans rejoined the waking world. The Vindicator was no longer a relic. It was a crude vessel again. It was becoming whole. The doors slid open, and in stepped one of the revived. A woman in her late 40s, face scarred, eyes sharp. She looked at Ronan like she already knew who he was. You must be Dace's blood. Ronan, he replied. Captain, by necessity. Call me Briggs, Chief Systems Engineer, back before the Council sold us out. She scanned the room, ran her fingers across the console, and nodded slowly. Still runs like a bitch on fire. Damn thing refuses to die. Ronan stepped aside as she moved to the panel beside the helm. Her hands moved across it like she was caressing a wounded animal. She's pissed, Briggs said. The ship. I can feel it. She's awake, Ronan replied, and she remembers everything. Briggs glanced at the seed core readings. Her expression darkened. You activated Black Spire? I didn't see a choice. There's always a choice, she growled. You understand what happens when that thing completes? He nodded. Humanity gets reborn. Humanity gets unleashed. Ronan didn't argue. He just let the silence fill the air like smoke. Briggs sighed. Then I'll make sure she doesn't blow herself apart before that happens. She moved out without waiting for permission. Hallen stood slowly. We need to prepare for what comes next. You think they'll send more? They won't just send ships, Hallen said darkly. They'll send cleansers, eye splicers, planet scrapers. They won't take any risks. Ronan exhaled sharply and nodded. Then we get dirty first. He moved to the armory interface and unlocked the war protocols. Old Earth assault contingencies, blacklisted weapons, nano-swarm plans. Some of it was madness. Some of it was genius. All of it had been buried with the Vindicator for a reason. Captain, the ship said in his mind. Long-range scans detecting new signal. Warp signature, council grade. Estimated size, supercruiser. Arrival in 23 hours. There it was. They sent a capital vessel, Hallen whispered. No, Ronan said bitterly. They sent an executioner. He stared at the countdown. 23 hours. Less than a day until a ship 3 times the size of the Vindicator arrived. One that didn't care about survivors or surrender. It would burn the ice, bury everything, turn this place into glass and call it mercy. And yet, Ronan didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. He opened a direct line to the entire crew. Engineers, revived officers, convicts now turned soldiers. This is Captain Dace. You've seen what's coming. The Council never wanted us to rise again, but we did. This ship was buried, our people buried, our history, but you can't erase fury, you can't kill memory. He paused. In 23 hours the sky will fall, but we will not kneel. The comms fell silent. Then Griggs came in laughing. That was the most inspiring, we're screwed speech I've ever heard. Hallen smiled faintly. He gets it from his grandfather. Briggs came back up to the bridge, a small tablet in her hands. I rerouted power through auxiliary coils. You've got 70% shield capacity, partial cloaking, and some disgusting things in the missile bays. You're welcome. Ronan gave her a nod of respect. Think it'll be enough? Briggs looked him dead in the eye. Number, but it'll hurt. Ronan's jaw set. He returned to the viewport, the cold stars stretching like distant judgment. The Vindicator was rising, not just from the ice, but from history. And this time, it wouldn't be buried again. The countdown pulsed on the main screen like a heartbeat. Cold, relentless, and far too short. 22-17-36, 22-17-35, 22-17-34. Ronan hadn't slept in over 30 hours. He didn't care. The last time he closed his eyes, he saw Earth burning, not from memory, but from his grandfather's old war logs. The destruction, the betrayal, the broadcasted silence that followed. A planet left to die, not by alien enemies, but by human hands. The Council had done that. The same Council now sending a supercruiser to wipe Vortis 9 clean before Black Spire finished its rebirth. He stood at the central window of the bridge, sipping lukewarm black fluid from a dented ration mug. It tasted like rust and fire. Fitting. Behind him, the crew was buzzing. Briggs was coordinating internal diagnostics and boosting shield matrices using makeshift energy loops made from ancient Earth-era ship cores. Howland, now stabilized, had taken over tactical simulations, directing the surviving cryo-revived crew in repurposing defensive satellites that had been dormant around the planet's orbital belt. Griggs had taken to the lower decks, where the convicts, now armed and increasingly fanatic, had begun etching human war sigils into their armor and weapons. Ronan didn't know where they found the symbols. Maybe the ship had fed them through their dreams. Maybe the Vindicator was speaking to all of them now. Whatever it was working. The men were no longer scared. They were ready to die. And that terrified Ronan more than the Tayari fleet ever could. Briggs slammed a rusted core fuse into the primary reactor node, her hands blistered and shaking from heat and radiation exposure. The engineer working beside her, a thin, wiry man named Pike, who used to run sabotage operations for old Earth militias, was coughing blood onto the deck. "You good?" she asked, without looking. Pike wiped his mouth with the back of his glove. "Had worse hangovers." Briggs smiled grimly. "This one's permanent if we screw it up." The reactor hummed, a slow, deep vibration that ran through her bones. She could feel the ship responding to every adjustment like a wounded beast rallying under pressure. No ship today could match it. Not in guts, not in resilience. The Council may have advanced their tech, but their weapons were clean, polite, precise. The Vindicator was none of those things. It was brutal. When Briggs closed her eyes, she swore she could hear the screams of its last crew embedded in the wiring. She didn't know if it was the radiation, her nerves, or something worse. And she didn't care. In the old war shrine chamber, once a ceremonial room where the first officers gathered before deployment, Ronan sat alone with a relic in his hands. It was a black cube, no larger than a fist, etched with burn marks and the shattered seal of the Terran Defense Command. Inside it, his grandfather's final memories, locked in a neural encryption that only blood could unlock. He had avoided this moment long enough. "Ship," he muttered, "run legacy code, Dace Prime, bloodline authentication, unlock neural cube." "Confirmed. Warning. Memory content may destabilize emotional equilibrium. Proceed?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Do it." The room darkened. The walls lit up with projection lights, and then, there he was, Admiral Kent Dace. Pale, gaunt, eyes like shattered stone. "Ronan," the old man said, voice grave, "if you're watching this, then the worst has happened. The Council found the Vindicator, and worse, they let it live." He coughed hard, blood pooling in his hand. "There's something you need to know. Something I never recorded in the standard logs. Project Black Spire, it's not what you think. Ronan leaned forward, throat tightening. It wasn't just a seed vault or a backup of Earth. It was a reconstruction engine. It didn't just hold human history, it held enhancements, experiments. We'd started modifying our DNA, creating strategic evolutions, superior humans, soldiers who didn't sleep, engineers who could interface with machines by thought alone. We called it ghost blood tech. The image flickered. It was working. Too well. The council got scared, said we were trying to ascend, said we'd replace them. So they pulled the plug, burned the labs, killed the test subjects, but one of them, Subject Delta 4, escaped. Ronan's eyes widened. He's inside the Vindicator, locked beneath the seed core, sealed away because even we couldn't control him. If you activate Black Spire completely, he'll wake up too. The image leaned closer, eyes burning. He's not human anymore, and he hates us. The projection ended. Ronan sat in silence, heart thundering. This wasn't just about rebuilding Earth. This was about what humanity had become before it fell, what it had hidden, what it had tried to control. He stood, slowly. "Ship," he said coldly. "Status of containment vault, Delta 4? Integrity holding. Neural dampeners at 83%. Subject still dormant. Warning, subject shows signs of partial awareness." Define partial. Subject's brainwave activity spiked after Black Spire core reinitialization. Estimated time to full cognitive reactivation. 19 hours. Ronan didn't curse, didn't flinch, just turned and walked to the war table in the center of the bridge. If the council didn't kill them, Subject Delta would. He opened a secure comm line to Hallen and Briggs. "Status?" he asked. "Orbital grid is half aligned," Hallen responded. "Won't stop a supercruiser but might make them bleed." "Reactors holding," Briggs said. "We've got 74% shield integrity, 2 missile bays online. Railguns are charging, but I wouldn't trust the safety warnings." "Good," Ronan said. Then paused. "There's something else." He told them everything. About his grandfather's recording, the subject beneath the ship, the secret buried deeper than Black Spire. Silence. Then Hallen spoke first. "If he wakes, this whole galaxy might beg for the Council's mercy." Briggs said nothing for a long time. Then, "You still plan to complete Black Spire?" "I have to." "You'll release him." "I might release him." "No," she said firmly. "You will. And you're okay with that?" Ronan stared at the war table, at the approaching fleet, at the flickering red timer. "No," he said quietly, "but I'd rather release a devil of our own than kneel to angels that never cared if we lived." Briggs let out a slow breath. "Well then, let's give him something worth waking up to." The countdown ticked on. 1756:44. 1756:43. The air on the Vindicator was getting heavier. Not physically, but it felt that way. Like the ship itself was holding its breath. Waiting. Watching. 17:05:22, 17:05:21. Less than 18 hours left. Ronan paced the bridge, staring at the seed core feed on the overhead display. The sphere was glowing now, pale white light emanating from its seams like the core was bleeding power. Briggs had tried to stabilize it, but the systems were behaving like they had a mind of their own. And maybe they did. In the engineering wing, the backup dampeners holding Subject Delta were flickering irregularly. No one had touched them. No one could. The entire chamber was locked down by the ship's original AI protocols, accessible only by legacy captains. "Ship," Ronan said, stepping into the central chamber. "Update on Containment Vault Delta 4. Neural dampeners at 62%. Subject remains unconscious. Heart rate irregular. neural spikes detected in cortex regions associated with memory and aggression. He swallowed hard. Is he dreaming? Unknown. Hallen entered the bridge behind him, his steps slow. He looked pale again, older than he had any right to look after revival. He's waking up, Hallen muttered. I can feel it, same as before. We only stabilized him during the war by flooding him with sedatives through a cerebral port. Then we lost control when he found a way to shut the feed off internally. What happened after that? Hallen's eyes grew distant. He killed 7 crew members with his thoughts, turned the weapons grid against us, tried to reroute the ship's AI. If it hadn't locked itself down, he would have taken the entire carrier. Ronan stood silent for a moment, then walked to the terminal and keyed in a new directive. Prepare Alpha-tier manual override on Seed Core. Full lock. Passcode required every hour. Acknowledged. It was a temporary solution, but it was all they had. If the core failed, the rebirth would fail. If Delta woke up uncontrolled, everything would fail. And Ronan couldn't afford failure. Not now. Outside, the Tayari fleet had returned. 5 destroyers, 2 cruisers, 1 Colossus-class command ship, dwarfing the others, its underbelly glowing with rotating shield generators and anti-planetary artillery. The ship was known across the stars. The Judicator's Mercy. There was nothing merciful about it. A single salvo could break a planet's tectonics. Its sole purpose, extermination. Fleet ETA, 11 hours. The war clock ticked louder, and the Vindicator's past began clawing at the walls. In the cryo chamber, chaos had begun to stir. 3 of the pods had shut down prematurely. 1 had a cracked dome. Another had been opened from the inside. Ronan arrived with Briggs and Griggs just as alarms blared across the cryo deck. Inside the open pod, there was blood, and no body. Briggs crouched beside the open panel. This was forced open, not by malfunction. Are we sure it's not Delta? Ronan asked. Griggs shook his head, gun already drawn. Nah, that monster's still locked up. I checked the vault feed myself. Briggs pulled a rusted ID plate from the floor beside the cracked pod. Lieutenant Garland Urek, she muttered. I know that name, Hallen said over comms. He was one of the first to volunteer for the Ghost Blood trial program. Partial enhancements, neural acceleration, low-grade cortical restructuring. Ronan's eyes narrowed. That's a fancy way of saying he's not exactly human anymore, isn't it? But he's angry. Hallen's voice was grim. Urek thought Black Spire was going to turn us into gods. He didn't take it well when the program was scrapped. The lights above them flickered, then died. In the dark, Briggs muttered, Oh, damn. Ronan clicked on his shoulder torch and raised his sidearm. The ship groaned, not mechanically, organically, a long, low sound like something breathing through the hull. Then came the whisper, not from the communications, not from the air, from inside their heads. Why did you bring me back just to bury me again? Griggs spun in place. Who the hell? You opened the tomb. Now lie in it. Ronan barked. Ship! Isolate psychic transmissions. Attempt failed. Neural echo is internal. Source, subject Urek. There was a shriek from behind them. One of the guards posted at the vault entrance. A second later, his body hit the wall at impossible speed. Bones broke on impact. Blood sprayed across the bulkhead. Then came the shadow. Garland Urek stepped into the corridor, shirtless, pale, covered in frost and blood. His eyes glowed faintly blue, like starlight reflected on poison water. You were supposed to be legends, he hissed, not slaves to the same old command lines. Briggs raised her rifle. Stop moving. Urek didn't stop. He smiled. Griggs fired first. 3 slugs, straight to center mass. Urek didn't flinch. Instead, he twisted, his body convulsing unnaturally, metal groaning around him. The bullets slowed mid-air, then dropped, flattened. What the? Griggs backed up fast. Urek grinned wider. I'm the first ripple, he said, eyes locked on Ronan. When he wakes, he'll be the flood. And then he vanished. No flash, no sound, just gone, like a nightmare that had never been there at all. Ship, Ronan barked. Track subject Urek. Tracking failed. Signature unstable. Movement unpredictable. Intrusion detected in tertiary systems. Briggs cursed. He's already in the grid. Where's he going? No one answered. But Ronan knew. He's going to Delta. He's going to wake the real monster. 5 hours later, with the countdown near 6 a.m., Ronan stood in the war shrine again, trying to steady his thoughts. The crew was preparing the final orbital grid. Defense arrays were in place. Shields were charging. Weapons were synced. Everyone knew what was coming. And yet, it wasn't the enemy in orbit that haunted Ronan's mind. It was the enemy inside the hull. The lights dimmed again. Captain. The ship's voice trembled now, just slightly. Containment Vault Delta 4 has been breached. The blood drained from his face. Who did it? Subject Urek accessed neural override pathways. Delta is waking. Ronan moved to the lift without a word. His boots thundered through the corridors. Briggs met him halfway, face pale. You can't go down there alone, she said. I'm not giving that thing a chance to decide what humanity looks like next. Briggs followed him. Then we better be ready to shoot our own gods. When they arrived at the vault, the outer blast doors were already torn open. Not melted, twisted, like metal obeyed whoever stood within. The chamber was freezing. Inside, Subject Delta was still in his pod. Barely. The shell of it was fractured. His body, lean, muscular, laced with biometal, was hanging limp in midair. Not lying, floating. Urek knelt beside him like a priest. He's dreaming still, Urek whispered. But he's listening now. You've brought war back into the stars, Captain Dace. That's what he was born for. Ronan raised his rifle. You wake him, and I swear I'll turn this entire ship into a coffin. Urek smiled. You're too late. And then Delta's eyes opened. Delta's eyes opened like twin stars collapsing inward. No iris, no sclera, just light. Cold, blinding light. For a split second, the ship fell silent. No hum from the reactor, no ping from the incoming fleet, no heartbeat in Ronan's chest. He stood at the entrance of the shattered vault, rifle trembling in his hands. Briggs to his left, pulse rifle up. Urek still knelt like a loyal dog, smiling like a zealot who'd just witnessed his messiah stir. Delta floated motionless, suspended by some force that ignored gravity. He blinked once, and the steel frame of the cryopod peeled apart like soft bark under heat. Ship, Ronan whispered. Lock the vault. Seal us in. Warning, came the AI's fractured voice. Subject Delta overrides are active. Shipwide control compromised. Delta turned his head slowly toward Ronan, and a voice entered his mind. Not sound, but thought carved with a blade. You are not Kent Dace. I'm his grandson, Ronan said aloud, jaw tight. And I'm the last man standing between you and the rest of the galaxy. Delta's feet touched the ground without a sound. He looked human, mostly. Muscular. Tall. His face, however, was blank. Unscarred. Artificial in its perfection, like a prototype that never had time to suffer. Like something unfinished. Urek stood now, proud and trembling. He's awake, finally. They buried gods to protect cowards, but now we get to rewrite the story. Shut up, Briggs snapped, rifle aimed dead at Urek's chest. But Delta didn't look at her. He looked at the ship itself. Where are the stars? He asked, his voice not quite matching the movement of his lips. Ronan lowered his weapon, just slightly. We're under siege. The Council is coming. They sent a cleansing fleet. And now that you're awake, they'll double it. Delta didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Because of me? No, Ronan said. Because of us. A long pause. Then Delta stepped forward. The lights in the vault surged, dimmed, surged again, reacting to his presence like gravity itself had shifted. Even the Vindicator was unsure how to respond. Its systems pulsed erratically, ancient protocols conflicting with impossible variables. Ronan spoke carefully. You were built for war. You know that. But now we've got a choice. You can help us finish what they started, or you can finish us. Delta stopped, standing inches from Ronan, looking down into his eyes. Help? He said. That implies I care. His hand reached out, hovering near Ronan's temple. And for a terrifying moment, Ronan thought he was about to have his brain ripped out through his skull. But instead, Delta's fingers brushed his skin. And he saw Earth fall. He saw the betrayal, the lockdown of Black Spire. Kent Dace making the call to bury the ship rather than let its contents fall into enemy hands. He saw Ronan's rage, his desperation, his quiet decision to reactivate it all. Not for power, but because no one else would. Delta blinked. The glow dimmed. And for the first time, his voice sounded human. I remember silence, he said quietly. An eternity of it. Briggs whispered, And now? Delta turned to her. I hear screaming. And then the ship itself roared to life. Alarms flared. Incoming fleet entering upper atmosphere. Estimated impact bombardment, 5 minutes. Ronan snapped into motion. Briggs, get the upper batteries online. I want every railgun and missile tube hot. Hallen, activate planetary shields and rotate defense satellites into intercept pattern. Delta moved towards the central terminal. He didn't type. He just touched it. The screen exploded with data. Weapons came online that no one had activated. Sections of the ship that had never responded now pulsed with light. Buried command nodes opened like steel flowers blooming in fury. The Vindicator, for the first time since its burial, was whole again. Ship, Delta said calmly. Bring the seed core to 100%. Begin atmospheric override. Initiate ground-to-orbit weapon systems. Unlock Black Spire Tier 2 protocols. Confirmed, the AI replied, now without hesitation. Ronan turned sharply. What the hell is Tier 2? Delta glanced at him. Your grandfather was afraid of it. That's how you know it works. A rumble shook the ship. Then another. The ground outside cracked. Energy spikes rose from buried pylons. Giant towers began unfurling from beneath the snow, each one brimming with charged plasma. Ronan opened a comm to the crew. This is it. Final stand. We hold until we burn, or until they do. Griggs answered, manic and hoarse. Been waiting my whole life to earn a death like this. Then earn it. The skies lit up. The Tayari fleet descended like thunder. The Judicator's Mercy opened its lower ports, massive antimatter payloads dropping like falling stars, but the first payload never hit. The Vindicator's rail cannon struck it mid-descent, detonating the charge prematurely. The shockwave obliterated 2 destroyers. The snow exploded into the sky, blinding the others. Delta stood in the bridge, arms behind his back, eyes locked on the enemy. Primitive, he said. He launched 4 swarm drones from the lower decks. They didn't fly, they blinked, phased from one point to another like thoughts leaping across synapses. They tore into the nearest cruiser like surgical knives, severing hulls, targeting cores, eviscerating systems with no warning. Briggs couldn't believe what she was seeing. That's not human tech. It wasn't, Delta said. It is now. Ronan braced as a tremor hit the ship. Part of the outer armor gave way. Smoke hissed into the bridge. Shields at 64%, Briggs barked. core stress peaking. "Hold!" Ronan growled. "Hold!" Then the Judicator's Mercy fired. A beam of light, larger than any vessel, seared the landscape. It hit. The Vindicator screamed. Decks ruptured. Alarms wailed. Bodies flew across rooms. Hallen shouted through the comms, "We've lost portside reactors. Shields are collapsing." Then Delta raised his hand, and the core behind him exploded with light. The Vindicator answered. A final blast, drawn from the last of the seed core's volatile energy, surged into the upper atmosphere. It struck the command ship dead center. The Judicator's Mercy cracked in half. It didn't explode. It collapsed, folding in on itself like a ruined cathedral. Silence followed. And then the screaming stopped. Ronan stumbled back onto the bridge, blood in his mouth, one arm limp from debris. Delta stood where he had always been, untouched, unmoving. Briggs lay on the floor, half-conscious but alive. Ronan collapsed into the command chair, coughing hard. The ship spoke, its voice calm now. "Enemy fleet destroyed. Hostile signatures eliminated. Black Spire completion at 97%. Ronan looked around. "We did it," he whispered. Delta turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Number I did," Ronan frowned. "We're not your enemy." "Not yet." The lights flickered again, and for the first time, Delta smiled. "Your rebirth is secure, but remember, Captain Dace, some things stay buried for a reason." He turned and walked into the heart of the ship. Gone. No doors opened, no shadows moved. He simply wasn't there anymore. The Vindicator stood silent over the ashes of its enemies. Above the fractured ice of Vortis 9, the stars burned clean again, and across the galaxy, whispers began to spread, that the humans had returned, that the dead now lived, that somewhere in the cold edge of space, a god machine had screamed back into the void, and the galaxy had listened, and screamed with it.